Shavua Tov, a courtroom drama like you might see on TV or in the movies, is taught to us in one of the commandments in this week's Parsha, a commandment that seems to throw logic upside down. But before we get to that particular commandment, we'll just talk for a moment about the courtroom, because a courtroom is far more than just a courtroom according to Judaism. It is one of the three pillars of the world. The Mishnah says in Masechet Avot, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, the world stands on and exists on three pillars: truth, justice, and, no, Superman fans, it's not the American way, but it is peace. Emet, din, v'shalom. Truth, justice, and peace. And there's an order there, because if you think about it, if you don't have truth, then you can't have justice. There is a lot in this week's Parsha about unfit judges. An unfit judge is compared to an Asherah tree, which is a tree that was worshipped idolatrously. To have an unfit judge is to put an Asherah tree next to the altar of God. In other words, there's something about justice and having a Beit Din that is far more than just preventing people from clobbering each other over the head with pipes. It is something that the world depends upon for its very existence. There's something very holy. Matter of fact, the rabbis go so far as to say that when the court below, meaning here on earth, sits in judgment, God leaves the heavens in order to be present in the courtroom. And there's a verse which we say in the Psalms once a week, Elohim nitzav ba'adat el bekerev Elohim mishpot. God stands in the congregation of the Lord. Together with the judges, he is judging. In other words, God is present in the courtroom. So obviously, if you have an unfit judge, somebody who is on the take, or duplicitous, or dishonest, so obviously that is a terrible, horrible thing. It's like putting an Asherah tree, an idolatrous tree, right next to the holy altar, because this is a place that is supposed to be Kedusha, holiness, and inspiration, and yet here there's a corrupt, an invalid judge. So that obviously requires that in order for there to be din, there has to first be emet, there has to be first truth. Truth, then justice, and the result of that is peace. Peace between man and his fellow, peace between man and God. But what is this courtroom drama that we learn about in the Parsha? Well, it's called Edim Zomamim, those nasty, plotting witnesses. What's the case? Let's say that a couple of witnesses come to a court, and they say, we, on last Thursday, saw Ruvain worshipping idols in Beersheba. Now, the sin of idol worship is a sin that could potentially bring the death penalty. So these two witnesses are testifying that Ruvain did something for which he could be put to death. And the court hears their testimony and accepts it, but before the sentence can be carried out, another pair of witnesses, we'll call them pair B, shows up and they say, wait a second, last Thursday, you two witnesses, pair A, weren't even in Beersheba, you were together with us up in Yokneam, enjoying pizza and a movie. So the first pair of witnesses have now had the rug pulled out from under them. Their testimony is not only thrown out, but the Torah gives a special punishment to them. They must be put to death as if they had worshipped idols. In other words, the death that they sought for Reuven becomes their punishment because they were Edim Zomamim, plotting witnesses, and they were proven to be plotting witnesses by this second group who says, you were not even in Beersheba, you were together with us up in Yokneam. This is a very strange commandment, but what's even stranger is the concept of a Kalvachometer, which is a fortiori reasoning, is thrown out the window. It's turned on its head in this case. Because if I were to tell you that Group B of witnesses didn't get there in time, that indeed Ruvain was put to death for the idolatry he was accused of in Beersheba, and only then did Group B show up, I would think, well then certainly the witnesses A, who had Ruvain put to death, should be punished now. Because if, for just plotting to do it, and the Group B had shown up before the sentence was carried out, they had only plotted to kill Ruvain, they deserved the death penalty. Certainly if they succeeded in killing Ruvain, they should all the more so be punished. And yet, that is not the law. The Pasuk says, Ka'asher zamam, as they plotted. And the rabbis say, as they plotted, yes, but not as they carried out. And the commentaries are very bothered. Why do we throw logic on its head? Why don't we punish these witnesses if they actually carried out the punishment? I'd like to give three explanations. The first one is, I think it's from the Abarbanel, and the group of rabbis that tend to be very rationalistic, and they say, you know what? Logic is correct. These two witnesses should be punished, but if we do, we are going to destroy the institution of the court, because as we mentioned at the outset, the court is something that is holy. Because what's going to happen? Basically, the court is going to be saying, whoops, we put to death this guy Ruvain who did not deserve it. That court will be tainted for the rest of time. We have a similar idea earlier in the Parsha, where the Parsha tells us that we have to listen to the judges in each generation, and it says, do not stray from what they teach you to the right or to the left. And Rashi there explains, what does it mean to the right or to the left? Even if they say to you that right is left and left is right, you still listen to them. Which means, basically, that if the judges, the court, make a ruling, and you are 1,000% convinced that they are wrong. Let's say that they were asked some question in Halacha, and they give an answer, and you are 1,000% sure they muffed it. It's wrong. Nonetheless, you follow their decision, even if they say to you that left is right and right is left. Why? To preserve the institution of the court. Because let's say they do err once in a jubilee, once in a blue moon, but most of the time, almost all the time, they do not err. But what's going to happen is if you say, well, if you're sure they erred, so you don't have to listen to them, so then every genius who goes to court and doesn't like, or asks a question of the rabbis and gets an answer he doesn't like, is going to say, I know better, they screwed up. And you will never have any court being respected. So to protect the institution of the court, because it is something holy, therefore we will allow things that are even obviously wrong. A famous story is told about the sages in Yavne. Rabban Gamliel was the president of the Sanhedrin, and he made a calculation based on witnesses when Rosh Hashanah was to come out. And of course, if you know when Rosh Hashanah is, you will then also know when Yom Kippur is, because it's counted off from that. But Rabbi Yehoshua, one of the other sages, was convinced that Rabban Gamliel was 100% wrong. He declared Rosh Hashanah on the wrong day. And Rabban Gamliel heard about it, and he called in Rabbi Yehoshua. He says, listen, Rabbi Yehoshua, I want you, on the day that you think is going to be Yom Kippur, which we decided is not, I want you on that day, on your Yom Kippur, to come to the Beit Medrash with your wallet, with your weekday clothing, showing clearly that you are not observing Yom Kippur on the day that you think it should be. In other words, I want you to publicly demonstrate that you have accepted the decision of me and my court here in Yavne. And indeed, Rabbi Yehoshua did that. And when he showed up, Rabban Gamliel embraced him and called him my master and my student, and so forth and so on. In other words, Rabbi Yehoshua understood that you have to preserve the sanctity and the authority of the Beit Din. And even if it means once in a blue moon, living with a decision that you feel is in error, you do it anyway. So that is one explanation why, if these witnesses carried out the punishment on Ruvain that they accused him of, and he was put to death, so then, nonetheless, that decision must stay in order to preserve the court. That's one explanation. I was thinking of another explanation, which I'll just put in parenthetically, based on a book called the Katava Kabbalah, who says that the whole idea of the plotting witnesses is problematic. Why? We told the case. Witnesses A said Ruvain worshipped idols in Beersheba last Thursday. Witnesses B said witnesses A were with us in Yokneam for pizza and a movie last Thursday. In that case, witnesses A are put to death. But what if witnesses B had come and said, not that they were in Yokneam, but they said, no, we were in Beersheba too, and we saw Ruvain, and we saw exactly what you saw, and you got it wrong. He did not worship idols. So now you have two groups of witnesses who are just directly contradicting each other. These say he did, these say he didn't. In that case, the court cannot convict him. So why does the court convict these witnesses if instead of saying he didn't worship idols, they say, you guys were with us in Yokneam on Thursday? Why is that a better argument? In other words, we should say in any case that is two groups of witnesses contradicting each other, throw the case out. And yet we don't in the case where they said, you were with us in Yokneam. Why do we give more power to witnesses B over witnesses A in that case if they said that. Well, that is a divine commandment. It is what we call a chok. It is God's decision, it's God's decree, and whether we understand it or not, that is the rule. However, if they actually carried out the punishment, there's one halacha that we need to note, and that is that the witnesses, group A, they have to not only testify that Reuven worshipped idols in Beersheba last Thursday, but then when the punishment is to be carried out, they have to be part of the team that executes him. The Torah says expressly, Yad ha'idim tiheh bo varishona la'amito. The hands of the witnesses shall be there first to put him to death. So now, Group A is not just speaking, but they are actually doing. And doing raises the veracity of their account. You know, they tell a story about Leonid Brezhnev, the chairman of the Soviet Union. There was going to be a test of the nuclear codes, the nuclear system, and they brought him a mock-up of the nuclear button, and he was supposed to push it at a certain time. And he said to the people when they came in, they said, "Are you sure this is not the real thing? You're sure this is a mock-up? This is not going to do anything, right?" "Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's just a mock-up." And then when the time came to push the button, he broke out in a sweat and started trembling and had a nervous breakdown. Because when it comes to doing it, that requires a higher level of commitment. And so for these two witnesses to say that Reuven worshipped idols in Beersheba, that's one thing. But for them to actually kill him as part of the execution team, that's already something else. So in that case, we would say, you know what? These two witnesses who put him to death, Group A, they were telling the truth. It seems that Reuven really did worship idols. Otherwise, they would not have been able to carry out that sentence. So that would be a possible explanation. I put that in parentheses because I want to get to the Ramban. The Ramban says something very fascinating. He says, similar to the commandment of the sota, of the suspected wife. She's suspected of having carried on with another man. She's brought to the temple. She's given this drink to drink. Not going to go into the details, and that will test her physically. If she indeed committed adultery with the other man, so then she will die, and if not, she will live and perhaps become pregnant and have a child. So it's a divine test. And the Ramban says there is sanctity in a court. So you know what, says the Ramban? If they actually carried out the sentence and Reuven was executed before witnesses B came in, even if Reuven didn't worship idols in Beersheba last Thursday, there must be something that Reuven did to deserve to die anyway. And these witnesses and this process was just God's way of making sure that justice has been done. Because his logic is, a beit in a court has the Shekhinah, has the divine presence there. The divine presence, the Shekhinah, would not put to death an innocent person. Wouldn't happen. So there is definitely something in Reuven that brought this about, and therefore these witnesses, even though they maybe had evil intentions, nonetheless they were the agents of justice being done. From all of these explanations, we see that the court is something very holy and very sublime. Why so? And why is that important this time of the year? I believe it's because we have a commandment to imitate God, to walk in his ways. God is merciful, we should be merciful. God is kind, we should be kind. God is truthful, we should be truthful, etc. Well, the first thing God did was create the universe, and creating the universe means putting things in order with laws. Laws of nature, physical nature, and spiritual nature. God puts everything in its proper place and arranges the world. Well then, by having courts, we are doing the same thing. We are putting society in its place. We are keeping peace between man and his fellow. We have laws, we have a system, we have order. And that is holy. Seder, order, structure, is divine. And so therefore the court is fulfilling the divine purpose as well. And that's why God comes and leaves the heavens, where he created the heavens and the earth, and comes to the courtroom, where they are creating heaven and earth, as it were, in society. And so just to conclude, I think it's really relevant for this time of year. We have emet, the Mishnah says, emet, truth, and then we have justice, and then we don't have the American way, we have peace. Emet, this is the month of Elul. This is the time to be honest with ourselves about our character, about whether we've been observing the mitzvot, things that we need to fix, things that we should strengthen, things that are going well. To be honest, look in the mirror and give ourselves a real accounting. And that prepares us for din, for judgment, which happens on Rosh Hashanah, which is the Yom HaDin. And after Rosh Hashanah, we've gone through that process successfully, then we will make peace, shalom, peace between us and our fellow, and peace between us and God on Yom HaKippurim. May we all merit to be written and sealed in the book of life, health, and happiness. Shavua Tov.